I am so excited for you to be part of this delicious conversation today. I am already in love with our guest, Christine Kane, and you are going to just fall in love with her. I'm so excited and honored you're here. And let me tell you a little bit more about Christine before you get to be part of this beautiful conversation. Before Christine Kane founded what became a multi-million-dollar coaching company, she spent 15 years in the music industry, producing 7 CDs and a DVD on her own label while touring the globe over 200 days a year. She shared the stage with luminaries like John Mayer, the Beach Boys, Los Lobos, Nanci Griffith, and Shawn Colvin. Her success as a singer-songwriter had fans asking how she did it while staying true to her art and her soul. I love that. Those backstage questions turned into weekend retreats. Those weekend retreats turned into coaching requests, and that set her on a new path. In 2010, Kane opened Uplevel You, a company that serves the ever-growing class of sensitive, idea-driven, aggression-averse entrepreneurs, a class she counts herself a member of, and her work has attracted more than 125,000 loyal email subscribers and has coached thousands of clients into the 6 and 7 figures of their business. She has spoken at events from the Martha Beck Annual Conference to the iconic Emerging Women event. Today, Christine leads a small yet mighty team at Uplevel World headquarters in Asheville, North Carolina. Christine, I got to tell you, just our conversation before even coming on, I was like, this is a soul sister who is a beautiful, badass, bold soul, really just so taken by your beautiful energy. I'm so honored you're here today. Thank you.
Oh,
Thank you.
thank you. I'm so excited to be here and so great to meet you.
So great to connect. And I actually wanted to share. So I just want to share with you listeners that before ever I do a interview, I always do an intention. And today, before we started, I asked Christine if we wanted to do intentions. And I was just really moved by your intention, Christine. And I just thought to share this because we were joking as entrepreneurs and quick starts. For some of us, maybe if you're listening, it can be hard to kind of take a moment to be still. And I just love what you shared. So maybe if you don't mind just kicking it off with your intention. So beautiful.
Yeah. So before I do anything, like any kind of service that I'm doing, whether it's a coaching call or a podcast or my own podcast, I always pause and I gather in the energy. And my intention is always for the awakeness, awareness, and abundance of all who
Mm.
participate. And that includes myself, it includes you, it includes everybody who listens or whatever it might be. And so those 3 A's have been my guidance for a long time and my reason for being as well, even when I was a musician.
Oh my gosh, I love that. I also forgot to mention, I'm just going to do a little, like if you're watching this on YouTube, because it's beautiful. This book is just, I saw this book in this title. So it's The Soul Sourced Entrepreneur, an unconventional success plan for the highly creative, secretly sensitive, and wildly ambitious by Christine Kane. And I got to tell you, being in this entrepreneurial world for 6-7 years now, just seeing the word soul in there, it like my heart lit up because I found very few resources that have that slant and that deeper kind of soul connection. And so maybe we start there with your book because I just love what you did, and maybe to talk a little bit about what like inspired you to write this. Maybe share a little bit about some of the key takeaways. I have a question for you in one of the
Oh yeah,
chapters, but let's dive in.
absolutely. Well, it's funny. It's one of your listeners who is a client of mine who was one of the first people who pushed me on this because I was trying to, as many of us do, follow the business strategist's path of writing a book. And I have a company called Uplevel You. So it would make sense because I own the trademark and copyright and all kinds of stuff for Uplevel Your Life, Uplevel Your Business. And I tried to write a book about the word up level. I tried to write something very strategic. I tried to follow all the rules and write it in really fast and just get the formula down and have people come into my funnel. And I was bored to death within I tried it over a year and I hated my life. And one of the people who listens to your podcast who first introduced me to you was came up to me after one of our masterminds And we had just done a whole session on mindset, which is what I spend a lot of time doing. And I teach business in 2 tracks. I teach that all of us have a strategy track in our business and all of us have a soul track in our business. And the strategy track, we all know, like we read business books about them all the time, but the soul track is where all the log jams happen, and also all the richness happens as well. And so we were doing that at our mastermind, and Carolyn, this person, came up and said, you know, you need to write a book on this. You need to take this public. You need to stop hiding it for only your clients.
Yeah.
And you need to be brave enough to like bring it out there. And so when I started working with a book coach because I just was not enjoying the process, I started from this perspective and I didn't know what it was called. I just said, I have to start writing some of the stories of what it takes to live a bigger life, live making money from your own lights, and understanding the internal part of it, and not just being told have a good mindset, because that's what everyone's told. Like we're either reading like a Louise Hay book or we're reading like a Gary Vaynerchuk book. So we're either crushing it or we're loving ourselves. And I wanted to be able to like bring like we're crushing everybody else, or we're like, you can do it, you can do it. Like, and I think that there's this like rending of the spirit that happens for a lot of us who are a little more sensitive and want to figure out how do we blend, how do we live from a whole place in business. And that's what started me writing it. And I will say this was a very hard book to write, and I'm not trying to be like the martyr writer, because everybody talks about how hard it is to write a book. It's just that it took everything out of me. Like it was like really called everything I wanted to say up to the surface and made me really think, how do you want to teach this? What is the story you're going to tell here? And why does this matter? So that's how it started. But I'm happy to answer any questions you have about it.
Amen. Hallelujah. Thank you. I'm beaming, and I talk about like using your body wisdom. I have like chills. My heart feels warm, and I'm like, this is so needed. I think this is so true. And I know many of you listening are either entrepreneurs or thinking about being entrepreneurs, or just, I always say, want to be entrepreneurs in your life. Like, design your life from a place of choice and sovereignty and soul. And I got to tell you, especially those 2 dichotomies, although I love Louise Hay, grew up with her.
Absolutely. And I love Gary Vaynerchuk as well.
Yes, like both of them.
Yes.
But I love that you went into this. I love what you said, the richness, and there's the richness and then the log jams, like really connecting to that soul piece, and that you focus there. And I think it takes courage, because it sounds like the strategy book might have been the book that would have been easier, whereas this, I could imagine maybe took you a little bit more out of the closet, so to speak. I don't know if those are the right words, but.
Well, it's also that a lot of the publishers we spoke to, my agent, when he first read the proposal, he loved it. And he said, this is my wife. This is so great. But the publishers really pushed back and said, this doesn't work. So they either wanted me to create a book, like a Louise Hay kind of a book, like make this just called Soul Sourced and make this for everybody, or write a business strategy book. That's the other piece. So we had this, I knew it was going to happen, but I didn't realize just how big it would be for people, because it's just a different audience. I call it the new class of entrepreneur, and they are coming out of the woodwork for sure. And I think it is speaking the language of a lot of us. So that's the cool thing.
Is there a way, this is like, given the high level, obviously, because I feel like we could do 5 hours or like a day. You probably do retreats. Like I know the retreats you do, maybe just giving kind of the high level of your book. What those that are tuning in, like the high level, I did want to ask, I have a couple questions, but maybe just for you to give like the high level of the book, and how you've seen it really serve and help those that you said, the 2 tracks. I love that, the soul and the strategy, and how this soul sourced entrepreneur, how that's helped so many people.
Okay, so I did talk about the fact that every business has the strategy track and the soul track. And so the way I envision my clients and when I'm teaching them is there's one foot in one and one foot in the other. Because I think sometimes us sensitive people want it to all be about like that soul part, like just think good things and everything will be great and I don't have to worry about that strategy. So I want to get that out of the way, that this is not just like, oh, believe it and it will happen kind of thing.
Yeah.
So but the way I describe this book is that it's an unconventional, field tested plan for the thing I call that new class of entrepreneur. So it's a proven path that honors intuition, sensitivity, and creativity as assets, not as
Mm.
liabilities, as those traits are often labeled in the business world. And when someone starts to read this, what the end result is that it's this foundation of confidence and clarity and an exponentially more successful business based in a real grounded sense of authenticity and uniqueness. And I know there's a whole big mouthful right there. I said a lot, but it's that same thing where you and I were talking about how liberating it felt the first time we took like the Colbys or the Strengths Finders or Enneagram or any of those kinds of things where you finally feel seen. That's what I wanted this book to be for people, was that they weren't just like playing dress up and doing all the things that every business book has ever told them to do. I wanted them to step deeper into themselves and be able to run their business from that place of wisdom.
I love what you just said about, this idea of intuition, sensitivity, and creativity being assets, because way back when, like, those were considered, soft skills, or, like, you don't bring that into your business. And just to create space, to honor those as treasures is really, really powerful and
Mhm.
really important. Curious, one of the questions I had for you, and I feel like, so would you mind talking a little bit about the swords and the arrows and the meanings?
Well, first off, tell me what made you want to ask about that?
The swords and the arrows.
Yeah.
So, well, so arrows, this is going to sound crazy, but a couple reasons. One, I'm a Sagittarius.
Mhm.
Arrow is my sign. Um, what I've seen in business is that oftentimes you can come from a place of competition and trying to one up people. There's like the fear piece, or there's like aiming your arrow for what you really desire. There's like two ways of coming to anything. And so for me, arrow, I don't have a tattoo yet, Christine, but if I did, I would have an arrow. I've
Okay.
like picked it out. So I was curious just to hear you talk a little bit more about it, but I love
Okay.
the
No, that's
concept.
great. So that section, that is what opens up the whole, there's four segments of the book. It's divided into four parts. And the book is based in an acronym, and that acronym is I'm in. And it's something we started saying at Up Level because I realized so many of my clients they'd sort of turn their back to like the fact that they had a business or the business side of stuff or the stuff that made them
Mm.
uncomfortable. And so I'm in was my way of saying really show up and be in there. And so that second I, the part of in, that's the third section of the book, and it stands for interpreting circumstances or interpreting experiences. And once you've set an intention, which is the first section, and once you have managed your own power, which is the second section, the third section we go into is how do you translate? How do you interpret these millions of things that happen to you at all times? And so that section opens up with me when we were talking about Asheville, North Carolina. When I had first moved here, I had left behind a cubicle job. I didn't know what the heck I was doing. People were writing me from back home telling me I was going to fail. And I
Mm.
was at this bookstore here in Asheville called Malaprops. I was drinking my coffee, and this woman was sitting next to me, and she had a deck of tarot cards, and she asked me if I want to do a reading, which is the kind of thing that happens in Asheville all the time. And
Oh, I
there
love
wasn't
it.
it wasn't the big boom town that it was. And so she laid down the first card she put down was what I now know is the 10 of Swords, which was the guy face down with the swords all jammed in his back. And I looked at her and I'm like, this isn't looking so good. And when she started to talk with me about it, she said, that's one way to look at it, but let me talk about some other interpretations. So the chapter opens up, the whole section opens up with that. But then the next section is talking about where we get so mucked up in our translation of things and in our interpretation of things. And that is the Buddha's story of the second arrow, where the first arrow is the thing that happens,
Mm,
where your client says no, or you get your launch doesn't work, or no one's listening to your podcast, whatever it might be. And where we tend to go is to the second arrow, which is, and that means I suck, or, and it
yes.
must mean I'm not meant to be do business. And whatever your religious upbringing is, that God is now telling you to stop doing, like, whatever it is, we have these really violent self-hating second arrows. And so the whole
Mm,
thing is setting up that whole thing to learn how to do what I call it the alt 5 exercise, where you come up
mm,
with 5 different ways of framing what might have just happened and how it's connected to your intention. Because I always say that your intention, that's really what you're creating in your life. All the things that happen come from that intention, and it's really trying to get you to where you want to go. But
yeah.
most of us collapse on the what we call the bad things. Did
Mm.
that answer your question?
Yes, and I think one of the chapters that really stuck out to me was the interpretation traps. I think it was 18, about like how we, well, and it's interesting. I think like the second arrow, how when something happens, there's this like going to the worst case scenario, or
Mhm.
oh, no one responded on Facebook. I must not be making a difference. Or I hear this in my head all the time, and I just, it's such a, I love this, the alt 5. I love, if you can know that, then it's like, look, this is what we do, and there's a way to get out of it. I To just pause for a minute, because I actually wanted to, if that's okay, I want to ask you a little bit about your earlier career as a songwriter, how you got into that whole world in such a big way. And then how was it for you to switch from singing and performing to what you're doing now?
Yeah, so there's two big different things there, and I could, if you wanted to spend many, many hours talking about me, there's a lot of hours of talk there. So it's funny, the whole thing soul sourced. I really do think that we are always being called into our next place. And I take
Mm,
very seriously when someone is super dissatisfied or something's really off for them. And that was what was happening for me as a like before I became a musician. I was living in DC. I had my, what considered to be a very good job at a PR firm, and I'd gotten just out of college, and I hated all of it. Like I was
yeah.
just going, this can't be what life is all about. And I really followed that, and I knew I wanted to become a musician. I tell the story of this in the book. Of I started writing letters to God in my journal because I grew up Catholic. I did not have any other spiritual assets at that time. I had no knowledge of anything. I was a theology major. I thought I had completely failed at my academia, family's expectations, and I just finally sat down one night and I just said, all right. And I wrote, Dear God, in my journal, and I started sharing this dream of being a musician, and I had told nobody. And I thought I was going to get laughed at or something, but it's weird. Within a year, I'd left my job and I'd moved
Mm,
to Asheville and I'd started. And it wasn't because any big, movements or lights came out of nowhere. I just started taking the action in that direction. And
mm,
that part of my life taught me everything about. I loved that you talked about being an entrepreneur in your life, because I didn't know I had my own business at that time. I didn't think of myself as a business owner. I knew I wanted to play music, and I thought that I was going to get a big record deal and sort of be taken care of like all my idols. Like I would suddenly just, whatever. And what I had to do was I ended up having my own record label. I ended up having to hire people. I ended up like
yeah.
becoming good at business just so I could keep doing this thing I loved. It mattered that much.
Mm,
And my fear of the cubicle was so huge. I was like, I'm not going back there, man. No matter what it takes, I am going to do this. And so as I grew and I hired my first coach, and that was like a game changer.
mm,
I started to realize, oh wow, all the ways that I framed things, all the ways that I thought, he just kept encouraging me and keeping me up leveling. It wasn't a word he used, but
yeah.
how I treated myself on the road, how I, once I started working with him, every photographer I chose, and I walk through these things that I call it your business backstage.
Yeah.
Every person I chose to work with, I started to look at them from the energy they brought to it.
Yeah.
And it taught me everything about creativity and music and supporting yourself and your dream in a way that's much bigger than you would normally want yourself to, or that little part of you would let you do. And that what was weird was after I started getting all that, that was when people started coming up to me and
Mhm.
asking me after shows, can I talk to you about my business? Or can I talk to you about, like, how do you do all this? And I don't talk about it on stage. They just started seeing something in me. And then I started doing retreats. And when I did make the shift over to music, I mean, over to coaching full time, it was a big deal. And I have a podcast and I talk about it. It's called The Breakdown, like the breakdown before the breakthrough.
Love
And
it.
it was my own story of making that shift, because it was not easy, because people want you to stay where they want you to stay.
Yeah. Yes. Can we talk about that for a minute? I think it goes, the whole name of the show is the Youest You, which I feel like we're talking like we're in the same like soul language, because what I'm hearing is, okay, so the fear of the cubicle and just feeling out of alignment, that got you to really go to search deep. You wrote these beautiful letters to God, didn't tell anyone. And one thing I picked up when you were speaking is, and I agree with this, is the finding the energy alignment and with energy of people that you brought into your world,
Yes.
that you, and I'm with you in that. I think it's everything. And people started, it sounds to me like you magnetized this. People could feel that magnetic energy you started, I mean, radiating. And just to talk about, this I think can be really hard when we start to hear the soul call, our soul call, and when those, want us to stay in a certain position. I know for me, I ended up, leaving a marriage with two kids that are really young, 10 years ago, because it wasn't the right fit, good person. And honestly, Christine, it was one of the hardest times in my
Mm,
life. A lot of people who are wonderful people, like it was very hard for them. And I knew that. And just, I think it was hard for them to see that change. And it's happened before in other ways. And there's some sort of like something that happens inside to be able to be around that storm.
yes.
Curious to hear your,
Well,
how that's,
anyone who's
yeah,
made those kinds of big changes is sitting there nodding with you, because it is
yeah,
the hardest thing. It's why there's a part in the book about tolerations, and tolerating is one
yeah,
of the easiest things to do, because when you make a mistake, it's like you fall on your ass and then you got to like fix it. A toleration,
yeah,
you never really do. You just keep getting, it keeps getting worse and worse, and you keep tolerating and tolerating.
yeah,
And it's because we have this terror of, what are people going to think?
yeah,
Or what if I land on my ass, or whatever? And we just never pull the trigger and tell the truth. And what
yeah,
you're describing is aligning with, and what I'm going to call the truth, because it's
yeah,
a tough one, because this is sort of your truth. It's not the truth. But I think we have to start learning how to tell the truth
yeah,
in our lives. I think we are all very good at lying. And I don't
yeah,
know that we would call it lying. Like, it's not like yeah, I take your milk money and say I didn't, kind of thing. It's we've just gotten good about like just falsifying all kinds of stuff in our own lives. And when you really come down to it, it's very simple. Like for you, I'll bet you created, like, if you're like anyone, and I just went through my separation as well, so I know how hard that is.
mm,
There's so many ways that you just sort of like pretend
mhm,
that it's okay, or you pretend that you can do this, or you should do this, or the shoulds, come up. And at some point you start to, your body, I think you get so good at knowing yourself, your body does not let you play that game anymore.
oh,
And there's always that big one, the big one where you're like, I've got to make this move. And then I
yeah,
think you get more and more tuned in, of like, when something's not right, you know it. And you don't have that, you no longer can do the long term, like, I'll just keep on going and I'll just keep like dealing with this. You can't do it anymore. And I think truth just keeps getting more and more tuned in, more and more tuned in, more and more tuned in, and
mhm,
also more and more simple. I think that's what's happened for a lot of people this past year is that all the space and the silence that this last year has created for a lot of people, not for everybody. I know you have kids, so it's like probably not as much space in the silence, but there's been a lot less being able to bounce right into the next thing or keep on tolerating. And you're really having a look at some of this stuff. And that's, to me, the path of entrepreneurship is
Yeah.
you can't, I just don't think you can keep deflecting, and you just can't keep playing games. You are on the line for everything at all times. And for me as a musician, I used to think to myself at one point as a musician, I could die right now and I feel like I've done what I was here to do, because I got up and out of so much. It was so hard. I had so many illusions around what it was going to be a musician, and just the rejection and the bad reviews and the good reviews and the this and the that. I had to grow up so strongly and then run my business and then charge money. And that's a hard thing for people. And I had to get out of just sort of like, whatever, if you think I'm worth it. I had to like start naming a price and saying things and dealing with people who didn't like that I charged them, all that kind of stuff. That's what I love about entrepreneurs. And I love about women having to do this, because we have taught ourselves so many tiny little ways we play small. And it's just,
Mm.
when you break out of that, it is so cool. Like, you start to realize this isn't even half of what I thought the problem really was. Like, it's so much deeper than that. And you stand on such a stronger ground. It's why I'm so grateful that I actually did quit the job and start being a musician. And I didn't become Madonna by any stretch of the imagination, but I did create a successful career.
Yeah. Oh, there are so many nuggets in what you just said. And I think what we're really also getting to is having the courage to, when you start getting that nudge, that knowing, that soul calling, that soul sourced calling,
Mhm.
is you get to choose. And for you to leave, I mean, I was really thinking about this for you, like leaving a music career like that. This wasn't in a cube anymore. I mean, you're
Yeah.
actually,
I was
you
doing
know,
living the dream. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, that's pretty cool to be on with John Mayer or the Beach Boy,
Yeah.
whoever, and to do your thing. And to switch again, it takes something to do that.
Yeah.
And I salute you and honor you. And I think, I'm curious if you had any, sounds like you've really honored that. I know for me, because I did not listen for a long time, I did have a health crisis. My throat chakra, which I got intuitively, but my thyroid just went offline. And as
Oh,
I'm working on healing it today, but this is 10 years now. I mean, I knew, I was like, oh, that's interesting. I didn't speak my truth. Look what
yeah.
happened.
Yeah.
I'm just curious, like for you.
Well, I will tell you what happened for me was, it was when I was fully ensconced in the music career. It was 2005. I'd had a bunch of CDs come out. I was doing well. And I had the kind of the intuitive hit that I would not be playing music forever. And there was that part of me, that the little, we talked about being a quick start, that was like, oh, I'll just shut the doors and I'm done. And I have a little bit of a drama queen kind of a thing, where I've done that. Like, I've done the drama stuff. Um, and I sat there with that, and I said, what if you allow this intention? You're not going to do this anymore. There's some other thing that's going to open up. What if you keep playing music and you follow as this thing opens? That was 2005. In 2006, I discovered blogging. I was a artist that was on CD Baby, and Derek Sivers, however you pronounce it. I've heard it both ways, but really wonderful human. He had started CD Baby, and he sent out an email to all of his artists talking about blogging. And something about it just like opened something up in me. I went, I don't know what it is. And I got way into it. And I started a blog in 2006, and that was back when people read blogs. And I was talking about everything from creativity to being on tour to intention, like just random stuff. It wasn't music. But on the sidebar of my website, I had my guy put up like to download a free song and give me your name and email. And this was before anyone was really doing that kind of thing. And after a month of blogging, my iTunes sales went up like 400% in 1 month. And I'm not saying like I was rolling in millions or anything, but it was really interesting. And then my retreats, what started happening was people were coming to my retreats who didn't know me as a musician for the first time. Like they only knew me as a blogger. And then I was like, wow, that's interesting. And then I created an online program. And so what happened was that intention started to open up in ideas.
Yeah.
And rather than saying, I'm going to dramatically take the leap out of my life as a musician and make the big announcement so everyone would like rally around me, I followed it through. And I made my last CD in 2009 and left in 2010. And I didn't make a big splash out of it. I didn't make a big announcement out of it. I'd already started my masterminds and the coaching was already growing. I just sort of made this, it was not a big moment. It was just a little shift. And I still had people though, like for years, at my events and things. Like I had an event in Atlanta, I remember there was like 350 people in the room and I'm coaching and a woman gets up to the microphone to ask a question and she had been a music fan and she said she shared with the whole room about how pissed she was when I left music and she had been angry with me for years, like angry. And that she finally ended up, she's like, well, what if you opened her one of her emails because you liked her as a musician, maybe you'll like her as a whatever she's doing now. And she ended up coming to an event and becoming a client. But it's, yeah, I did have pushback later. And then people would get pissed at me for talking about money because the music world, you don't do that kind of thing. But it was a weird little shift, but I did it differently than most people make big changes. I followed the intention and let it open things up for me. And I let ideas and delights and things I didn't like so much anymore kind of show me how that intention was guiding me.
Oh, I love that so much. There's such a, you talked about this being an asset, your intuition. There's such a listening, a deep listening and a trusting and following your intuition here. I love that, like, it also, you know, I think sometimes we think it's like a big, like you said, there was no like drama queen big announcement. It was really following the impulse, following the instinct. Oh my gosh. I
And that's
just,
what most of us have
yeah,
the capacity to do, but I think we've gotten so mediated out, like the media makes it all seem like, and one day, you know, she leapt or whatever. And
right.
it's usually a little more boring than that.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's not as big, but we like to tell a really good story. But I will say here, I'll tell you one funny ego story about it was like, I had you know, started Up Level You. It had become a multi-million-dollar business. I had a team of 9 people and I was eating dinner out in Black Mountain, North Carolina, right outside of Asheville. And this person who was the president of a local college here, who had hosted me at their summer, they have a summer songwriting festival. He and his wife saw me sitting at the table with a friend and they came up and they looked at me and they went, hey. And they had the little head tilt, like the, oh, I'm so sorry thing.
Yeah.
And they're like, we heard you're not a musician anymore. And then she looks at me, she goes, we heard you became a life coach. And there was almost this thing of like, they wanted to like give me $1 so I could go buy some, you know, get a bagel or something like that. Like they were really sad for me. And I cracked up because there was that little ego part of me that wanted to be like, I'm running a company and I have a team of 9 people. Like I didn't, but I was like, I just was like, Christine, let
Right.
let your ego get a little bruised here because the people in the
Yeah.
music world see this as a bad thing and it's okay that they see it as a bad thing. Like I didn't want to be like, it's okay. I meant to do this and it was intentional. And it was kind of a thing. I just kind of was like, you know what? Doesn't matter what people think of you. You already know this. Just let it go. So I did.
Oh, I love it. I love that story. I love it. I love how you bring in, like, you saw the ego. Why it just
Yeah.
so great. One thing I love about you is your authenticity and just the self-awareness. Like I gotta say, I mean, clearly you're in this, you know, self-exploration industry. I mean, but really as I'm listening to you, I'm like, what courage and self-awareness and compassion and you know, being like just real, like, yep, ego showed up and was like, I don't need money for a bagel. I'm actually doing great. Like things are fine. Things are
I
fine.
promise. I promise.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
we all have those moments where I
Yeah.
think we get so scared. And this is one of the things that scares us out of doing something big is like the what
Yeah.
will people think?
Yeah.
We are
Oh,
so scared of that. I mean, that's ultimately what comprises our ego is everybody's opinions and everybody's thoughts. And all it is a
yeah.
big,
Yeah.
big, huge bundle of stuff all rallied around us or something. And most of us just don't even know who we are without all those opinions.
Yeah. Absolutely. I am curious before I'm like, I literally feel like this conversation, I want to talk to you for 20 hours. Like it's delicious and I don't want it to end. Before we wrap, I have a couple questions that just one that popped in is that I'm curious what your daily alignment practices are. Like, how do you stay connected to to being soul source, to being connected to your soul's calling? You're probably one of the more present human beings I have interviewed and had the pleasure of getting to connect with and know. And I'm like, what are you doing? Because it's working. Maybe share with
Um,
us.
well, first off, I'm not, I'm good at habits, but I started going to silent retreats and that sort of changed a lot of stuff because I've gotten to where I habited myself into where I started to really trust myself. And then when I started to really trust myself, I can be a little bit more in that flow. But I meditate, but I don't have like the big meditation practice like I used to. It started with like every day at a certain time. Um, and I think part of it is that I've grown to start trusting myself, but
Yeah.
every day to me is sacred. Every day I read some form of I don't even like the word spiritual, but some form of spiritual text of something. I don't, it might, depends on who the teacher is or who the writer is. It could be anywhere from old to new, whatever I'm drawn to. Um, I do what some I think would call kind of maybe even prayer, but really like remembering who I am, really getting clear on what the priorities are for the day. I try to really show up for each person I'm serving. I try not to look at any interaction as, oh, let's just
Mhm.
get this out of the way. Um,
Yeah.
but before that, I mean, I will say I did morning pages from The Artist's Way. That
Yep.
was one of my most influential books when I first started music. Meditation practice has been huge. Working out for me is huge. I weight train, and I wish I could say I did like yoga and all the cool bendy things like that, but I get an enormous amount out of pushing heavy things around and lifting heavy weights because I don't know what it does. It gives me emotional and mental stability. And I am the opposite of you on the Enneagram. Like we talked about the Enneagram, I'm like the the deep dark side one where you're the bright shiny one. And so I do stuff to make sure that that's not like running the show. I don't I so I really really make sure I'm working out. I hike and in all communications, I try to just show up really, really present. And I practice kind of
Mhm.
it's a lot of the stuff that I preach. It's sort of all in that book. I mean, that book is very much me.
Yeah. Totally. Oh, that's so, I'm also getting to what you said, and I relate to this, and I'm sharing this for people that have written in about this. Like, there's not, it sounds like there's not a formulaic routine per se, but there are things that help you. To me, that's kind of a balance of bringing in that that feminine energy of the yin, of going within, of trusting. I know for me, I've had a huge healing by being okay with allowing that energy to guide. And I just, as you're speaking, I'm like, oh, I am with you. It's like, doesn't have to be the same thing every morning with these, and for some that might work, but I'm just vibing with you on that. And I think
Yeah.
the permission. So
Well, some of that started to happen last year because the during the pandemic when and during all the political unrest, I don't know if you experienced this, I had times where I just felt like I was like getting scared or and I knew it wasn't all me because I'm fine. I felt like I was taking on stuff and I could some of my clients were really freaking out. And what I started to do was I just was like, I will work when I work. I will meditate when I meditate. I will walk in the woods when I walk in the woods. And if sometimes I'm working at 10 at night, okay, that's what I'm doing. This
yeah,
year, all bets are off. Like I'm going to do what I do. And I also started getting kind of into it. Like well, this isn't so bad, because it doesn't mean I'm, you're working on a weekend, Paul. I also blew off all day Tuesday. So it's, it's one of
Right.
those kinds of things where I just sort of like went with it. And I really found that I enjoyed a lot of the flow. But with that said, I like a good habit. I think that habits are very useful, but I do think that we can get really, really wrapped up in it. And there was one point
Yeah.
with my meditation practice where when I got up off the little cushion and I pressed my little meditation timer and I went to my little to-do list and checked it off. And I'm like, something is not right about this.
Yeah, it does
Do you
not
think
feel.
Ramana was doing this? Like, I don't know that this is really getting there, but it did. That got me started. And I think this is the thing, is that sometimes you got to get started wherever you got to get started at. And then you have to be in relationship with the practice. And that's where your wisdom starts to come out.
Love that. I love that, Christine. Who do you, when you hear the words "Youest you," what does that mean to you? How do you feel that you're expressing that now? I'll wait to ask you the next question, but yeah, what does that mean to you?
Yeah, it's funny. Before we got on, I sat there with that, and it's meant different things over the years, but I'm going to link it to something one of my peers asked me last week, because we were doing a little co-coaching call. And she asked me, what does self-love mean to you? We were picking out words of the year, and she was going to choose self-love. And I said, give me a second, because I want to go deep with this. I don't want to just bark something out. And when she went and used the bathroom and she came back out, we were at my house, and she said, and I said to her, what I think it is that it's not a concept, it's a way of being. And it's really the most natural, like the most natural you that there is. And when I hear the
Mhm.
youest you, it really is. And it's going to maybe sound funny, because I mean, sometimes I think it can mean you're making it happen, but I think when we are all at our happiest, there's this like organic way that we navigate the world, and it's a real natural place, and there's a real peace to it. And that's what I think of when I hear that, as opposed to try harder, which is what so
Mm,
many of us have done in our lives, and I've been there too. But like to let go a little bit and really just do it your funny, cool, delightful sort of way.
I love it. Oh, I love it. It also, with that, I hear like there's not struggle, it's a flow, it's a connectedness at a deeper level that's to me like that co-created, natural, organic, yeah, connected to something higher.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, that's beautiful. I like to always end with just putting it back to you. I call them heart flares, like when your heart is like, I have something I need to say. I don't want to say it here. So I just love to ask if there's anything I didn't ask you, or any heart flares that are just coming up and want to be expressed in this conversation.
I'm checking. I think just since I'm so into words and word of the year, I think the thing that comes up is just trust, like just really having a trust
Mm,
in your life
yeah.
and in your business, like really trusting that it is all showing you where you need to go. And I think
Mm,
a lot of us have lost that in our noisy, attention starved world, where we're all just giving it to everything outside of us. And so
mm.
that would be the thing I would guide people on.
Oh, it's beautiful. Yeah. Yeah. To find it within. That is fantastic. Well, I gotta say, so for those, we didn't mention this, but I think we both had one of the same first jobs, White Mountain Creamery at Boston College outside of Newton, Mass. And I'm like,
Yes.
from one scoop of ice cream into the other. And just, I mean, you are, I truly, what I love and adore and just honor you and your light and there's an authenticity. I keep coming up with that word, but I just love the way you've chosen to show up in the world. It's very
Thank you.
inspiring, and
Thank
it's
you. Well, I'm honored to be a part of everything you've created as well. It's very exciting.
thank you, Christine, for just shining so much light here. There's so many nuggets. You should see my notes. I will be sharing this with everyone, and where those that are listening who have also fallen in love with you, where is the best place they can find you
Well,
and your music?
the book is at Amazon. It's The Soul Sourced Entrepreneur. That's on
There we go.
Amazon. And it's also, you can read more about it at soulsourcedbook.com. And music, my music's all on iTunes. It's Christine Kane. And my website is christinekane.com. And that's where people can find me. And then I'm all over social media. I'm not going to go into all that stuff, but they can find me and write to me. And I'm fairly present. I am not like as Facebooky as some, but I try to be there as much as possible. But I try to also monitor my own energy and not get all swept into
Yeah.
all the distractions, all the things. That's what we call it on my team. All the things.
All the things. I'm
Yes.
just going to say one that's like a bonus heart flare, which I think is to manage your energy and really notice. I love that's something that I hear you doing and so important. We'll also have everything in the show notes. So all of
Great.
these links will be there. I
Great.
just want to thank you so much. And on behalf of all of you listening, just Christine, thank you for
Mm,
being such a beautiful light, for being here and for shining and
thank you.
inspiring.
It's been my honor and a real, real joy in my day. Thank you so much.